We'd like to hear the Puppeteers play the characters that you cheer. So join us as we go below the frame.
On this episode of Below the Frame, I am speaking with Emmy Award-winning Sesame Street Muppet performer Ryan Dillon. We talk about growing up in Philadelphia, making his own puppets and creating his own characters, and of course, Elmo. We're also going to hear a story and another song from Jerry Nelson, so don't be an idiot. It's time to go below the frame.
Go below the frame.
Welcome to Below the Frame, your podcast for listening to conversations with Muppet performers. I am your host, Matt Vogel, and I wanted to bring up something just real quick here. Clear the air about something that kind of has been brought to my attention. I got a couple of posts sent my way on social media asking, why are you saying the Disney Muppets? Why not just the Muppets? And I get that question, totally valid question. And what I usually do is I say Sesame Street and Disney Muppets. And I do that to delineate the difference between the two groups. They're both Muppets, the Sesame Street Muppets and the Disney Muppets. And on the original Facebook Live version of Below the Frame, that was only really about the Sesame Street Muppets. We did it live from the green room at Sesame Street, so that's kind of what it was. And and speaking of those Facebook Live shows of Below the Frame, they are still up on my Facebook page, but I've also posted them to my YouTube page. So just search for me or Below the Frame on YouTube, and you can subscribe there and watch all those old episodes that are all about the Sesame Street Muppets and Sesame Street people, cast and crew. But back to the Disney Muppets for a second. In truth, Disney does own the Muppets, Kermit and Company. So in the end, I thought that it would be a good way to let people know that we're not just delving into Sesame stuff on this podcast, but the whole Muppet spectrum of characters. So, all right, now that's out of the way. So today on Below the Frame, I get to talk with my friend Ryan Dillon. He is Elmo on Sesame Street, of course, and he won an Emmy for Outstanding Principal Performance in a Daytime Program as Elmo this year. I am so proud of him. He works so hard on Sesame, and he is so deserving of this recognition of his talent and effort. And but you're not going to hear us talk about that during this interview because I was so jealous, I just didn't even want to acknowledge it. No, that's not really it. We recorded this interview weeks before the awards, so it just wasn't a topic of discussion. Okay, so now you know. All right, I am ready. Are you? Yes, I knew it. Great. Let's go Below the Frame with Ryan Dillon. Hello, Ryan Dillon.
Hi, Matt Vogel. Hi.
Thank you for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for, we could just go back and forth all day.
In different ways we can thank each other.
We're very kind. I would say that we know each other. We've worked together for years and years.
You would say that, wouldn't you?
I would say it.
We have known each other for years and years.
Yes. But I don't know if we've ever really sat down and just kind of talked about our histories, really.
I don't think so.
I don't think. I
don't know if I know your middle name. What's your middle name?
I don't feel comfortable.
Oh my God! It's a sore spot already. 1 minute, 5 seconds in.
Yeah. No, it's James.
It's
my
James.
middle name is James. What's
John.
Your middle name?
Mine is John.
Those two
J's.
Two J biblical names maybe. James, I'm sure is a biblical
totes
name.
Biblical. Yep.
Yeah. But we haven't discussed anything really. Our histories at length.
No.
Have we?
I don't think
buckle
so.
up. Because we're going to do that with you. That's what we're going to do. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready.
All right, Ryan. So, did you grow up in Philadelphia or outside?
I grew up in Philadelphia, in Northeast Philadelphia, which is 30 minutes from the downtown. It's 30 minutes from the Bell. And, I grew up there, and I lived there until I was about 18. And then I moved outside of Philadelphia in a little place called Scranton, Pennsylvania. I lived there for a little while.
Where the office takes place.
Where the office takes place.
It's famous for that.
It is famous for that, yeah. And they've got the local mall does an office fest, and one of the people from The Office shows up, and it's a huge thing. And then they drive down the main avenue, and people cheer for them. That's kind
of cool. That's nice to celebrate their hometown.
It's nice. It's nice. It is.
Wait, tell me about your family. Like, name the members of your family.
My family's names are my father is Jack Dillon and my mother is Marie Dillon, and I have a sister named Tina.
What did your parents do?
My father I always get it wrong, but he worked at for years and years and years. He worked at an electrical supply company, and I can never remember his job title.
Supervisor.
He was a supervisor.
Why not?
He was very high up. And my mother, and then he, in the evenings he would bartend. So I actually spent a lot of my time as a kid in a bar where my father bartended, and it was great. It was like, everybody was so nice. The regulars were like, oh, the kids are coming. There was a guy at the end of the bar who was bald, and he used to eat onions like apples. And this is not a bit, I swear to you. And he would read the paper every day, and if I could write my name, he'd give me $1. This lasted until I was about 8 years old. And I made bank, man. I made bank.
You sure did.
But so my dad worked as a bartender. And then my mom did lots of different jobs. She worked in mostly in like retail. Mm-hmm. So we had, sort of a modest household growing up. And
and what were things other than going to bars?
Yeah.
What did you do as a kid?
What did I do as a kid?
What were things you did?
I was a very independent little kid. I was always kind of a ham, but shy around new people. Puppets were always in my DNA, and drawing was.
Was it because of were puppets always in your DNA because of Sesame Street? And
Yeah,
you've been
Muppets.
exposed to it.
My first television memory is seeing the Muppet. The very first time I remember seeing television was the opening of the Muppet Show.
Oh, that's cool.
And I remember, my first real memory is seeing it through the bars of my crib, and just wanting to get into the TV with that kick line of like Muppet ladies, and I was like, how do I get in there? And
oh man,
so that was super.
So you must
early.
have been 9 or 10.
I was 9 or 10 in my crib. I was writing my name on
looking through the bars of your crib.
Yeah.
Because you were born in the late 80s, but you really are kind of a kid of the 70s. Do you know what I mean?
Well, what's weird about it is that I didn't. It's funny because people of my age will say, "Hey, remember that like Nickelodeon thing?" And peripherally, I do. What I was watching was all. I grew up in the land of cable, where it was all reruns, and I think it's also because that's what my parents tended to watch. I remember my dad sitting me down and saying, like, you're going to watch this. And it was All in the Family. And I was like 6 or 7. And we used to watch All in the Family at night together. So I kind of had, and it was, there was just something about that kind of television that I really responded to. Like Mary Tyler Moore and all of those sort of, like those sitcoms that were little one acts, and there was something really appealing about that. But then I also, I loved the Muppets. I was like, the hugest Muppet nerd, and I still am, but that was my big thing. And then but Looney Tunes was a big deal for me.
Are your parents funny?
My parents are
people?
They are funny they are funny, but I don't think they would categorize themselves as funny. They do funny things. They're very eccentric. My dad definitely had more of a performance side to him. He would do voices, and he would read when we were kids. He would read books to us in the voices, and he would get into it. And, so he had more of that kind of thing. And my mother's very quirky, and she's funny in ways that we then have to tell her that she's funny. She's funny because she's doing strange things, but she's we're all a little bit strange, and so a lot of it came.
That makes for a fun family.
It does. They're still incredible. They were super supportive of my very weird, never-ending obsession. I remember my mom thinking, and my mom said to me once, if you haven't grown out of this yet, I don't think you're going to. I just thought, well, you're probably right.
You may be right, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were growing up and you watched The Muppet Show, were you thinking that I want to do that, or were you just obsessed with just watching the colors and the characters and the humor? Do you remember being conscious of that, thinking, I want to do that thing that they're doing?
I remember being conscious of it very early. because I knew who Jim Henson was super early. There was that, because he died when I was I was like 2 or 3. I was like I was a baby, but I knew who he was, and I remember my family was upset when he died. Like my mom, I remember being very upset when he died, and I think maybe I knew more. I think I started to figure out a little bit more about it when they did a special honoring Jim Henson with all the Muppets, kind of trying to figure out who he is, and I remember seeing that really early, and I think maybe that showed the Puppeteers, and then there was a another special that they did where Jim had all the Muppets on a blue screen, and he took away the background, he took away the key, and he pulled back, and all the Puppeteers. It was Jim and Dave and Fran and like the Titans. Yeah, and I just
that was from the Jim Henson Hour.
From the Jim Henson Hour,
Secrets of the Muppets.
Yep. Yeah, and they replayed that a lot in the 90s. For some reason, but I saw that and I just thought, okay, well that's it. If that's a job, then first of all, I don't want to work. I have no interest in working because that's for the birds, and this seems like a lot of fun.
Were you building puppets? Did you have puppets around your house?
I tried for years. I just figured it out that I've now been making puppets for 20 years, which is weird. It's
oh my gosh.
But I tried for years to make puppets, but there was no way to. It was two things. Number one, I wasn't really interested in making puppets at first, but it was like I'm sure it was the same for you. Like it was a necessity.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to the puppet store. Like I had my little Fisher Price Miss Piggy, but like it's a toy.
Those weren't gonna work.
It's not gonna work. I want something with a mouth. I want something with rods. I want the whole. Yeah. I want the whole thing. And in fact, the first real puppet I got was when I was about 10 or 11. Do you know Terry Angus?
Yeah. I don't know. He's
a terrific guy.
I don't know him, but I've seen his name and
lovely. And he's a really talented puppet builder. And he, in the early days of the internet, made my first puppet for me. For like,
oh really?
He was really generous to do it for what he did it for, and it was the first time I could see a real puppet, like with the real foam and the real mouth, and that inspired me to say, okay, well, now that I've seen it in person, I can kind of mentally break it apart and figure out how it is made.
You didn't take it apart.
I did later.
Look inside.
I did later, and I never told him. Sorry, Terry, but he probably would have done the same thing.
How old were you? Do you think when you did that? You were just trying to figure out.
I was like,
how do we do this?
11 or 12.
Oh my gosh, that's so young.
Because I wanted to know, I couldn't figure out the ratio of I knew it was a profile because I'd seen somewhere, like Jim draw the profile and cut it out and foam and glue it. I'd seen that, but I couldn't figure out the math. I'm horrible at math. So for years I would make heads and I couldn't put my hand in, or I used to take my stuffed animals, like I used to take my Kermits and stuff and rip them up to make them puppets, but the necks would always be too tight. And so it took a long time. And then I finally learned how to kind of do it, but there were no books. I remember, it was trial and error. Yeah.
At least on how to make puppets. I mean, I'm sure you were acquainted with the Of Muppets and Men book when you were young.
I didn't get it until I was a lot. That was, I'll never forget it because it was this legendary thing that I'd heard of. And that was something because of my age that was hard to get, because it wasn't in print, but I had The Works, which was the other book. And I actually,
that's right. That would have been the one that would have come out early 90s, I think.
Yeah. And I read the cover off of it. The cover actually fell off of it. I remember it was on QVC, and I screamed at my mom upstairs, like, we have to buy this! And she ran down the stairs, and I got it for Christmas that year. But I got Of Muppets and Men later, and when I saw that was like, that was molecular destruction in my mind. I just thought that I got to do that.
So in grade school, in elementary school, and middle school, high school, were you doing puppets? Were you building puppets? Were you doing puppet shows?
When I was really young, I did. I'll never forget, in first grade, I really wanted to put on a puppet show for the class. And I had my little Kermit and Piggy, and my dad made me a stage with curtains that opened and closed with like Sesame Street fabric from an old sheet. Yeah. It was like, it makes me want to cry when I think about it. And he was like, look, I figured out how to open the curtains. And
that's so great.
It makes me want to cry. But so anyway, I brought this thing to school, and my teacher was not super jazzed about me taking time out of the busy school day to be doing a puppet show.
Right.
But I did it anyway, and I did the whole show, and I was thinking, like, I really knocked it out of the park. Ryan, this is it for you. The stars are aligning. And at the end of it, my teacher said to me, Well, that was an extreme waste of time for all of us. And this is first grade, and I want to say this teacher's name, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to give her the satisfaction, but I'm going to say it in my brain. I'm saying it right now in my brain. It left an imprint in me forever, and I kind of put puppets away a little bit. But I wanted to do them, so I would do them at home. But I kind of pivoted. It's interesting thinking back now because I was trying to be really pragmatic at a very young age because I thought, well, I like drawing, and I could probably get a job easier as an illustrator than I would as a puppeteer because you can use it in a bunch of different ways. So I then did that for years. Like I would draw I would draw Mickey Mouse for someone in school, and and I was always doing bits and voice. Like I wasn't the class clown, but I kind of was always that guy who did voices and bits and impersonated people. So it all kind of congealed together. And then when I started picking puppets back up when I was in high school, because I was a visual arts major, which I thought for a long time was a waste of time, but I've actually learned
in high school you were a visual arts major. You had like majors. We had majors. In high school?
I went to a weird high school where it was college. It was basically all. It was 4 years of college prep. Basically, it was setting you up for the college lifestyle of learning. And so you would pick a major in your first year, and you could change your major. And I should have. I still regret to this day not switching to drama, but I was afraid. I was just gun shy about it. But so I stayed in visual arts, and which actually ended up being really useful as a builder, but also like for composing shots. Like I learned about composition, and I learned about, it's been valuable. But anyway, in my third year of high school, I needed some extra credit to get through one of the semesters or something, and so I said, well, if I make some puppets, will that work as some extra credit? And my teacher was super supportive of that. And so I started making puppets again. And about a year or so after that was when the Sesame Street stuff started to happen, and then it kind of snowballed after that.
Yeah. In high school, you went to a Sesame puppeteer workshop, is that right? Yeah.
In my, I think it was my senior year, I went to a big audition in New York, and it was very vague. I remember the listing was super vague about what it was, and then it turned out later to be something very big and very strange. But I just remember looking at it thinking, Muppets never looks for people. No one leaves the Muppets. I have to do this. Right. And so, again, my dad drove me to New York, and I think he drove around New York for the day because he couldn't get a spot. I mean, it's amazing.
So supportive.
So supportive. It just, oh my God, that's another thing. I really do think that has a lot to do with it. Thank God that they were so supportive, because if they weren't, I don't know if I would have kept going with it. But anyhow, so I went to this huge open call, and I was 17. I actually had to call Joe Roddy, or maybe it was Jill Colley at the time. I had to call and ask them because it was 18 and up, and I was 17, or 16 maybe even. And they said, well, we don't really look at people before. But I'd been sending tapes in, so they kind of were peripherally aware. Kevin had.
So they kind of knew Kevin had seen your stuff.
It was one of those things where I'm sure they went, "Oh, the name. I know we know the name, but we don't know who you are," kind of thing. But I'd been sending tapes, and Kevin had been responding. He actually called my dad one day when I was like 13. I started sending tapes when I was about 12. And I don't remember how I knew how to do that, or how to. I don't know how I got the information to send it.
But you seem like you were very driven anyway, so you figured it out, whatever it was.
I kind of just knew that I was
blind call.
I'm unemployable, so there wasn't really an option. I was like, this has to work.
I gotta do this.
I got to do this. So, but he had been sending tapes, and I remember he called one day, and I was like, I think I was maybe 13 or something, and my dad picked up. I wasn't there for some reason, and he said, he's really good, but he's 13, so there's nothing we can do. So just keep sending them. And so every year I did. I sent tapes every year. And then so anyway, going back to this audition, they finally said, okay, yeah, we'll let you in, but I think they just thought, let's throw him a bone and let the kid come in, and we'll let him go. And so I went in, and it was a huge thing at Ripley Greer. It was this giant audition. There was like 200 people there, and went in, and it was the sort of the judging table, the audition table. I never know what you're supposed to call that. the table of people who were judging you, and it was Kevin, and it was Jane Henson, Martin Baker, and a bunch of people that I'm forgetting now.
I mean, that's a big table.
And I didn't know
judges.
Jane was going to be there, so it was like, I was like, oh my God, Jane and Martin Baker. It just was like really stressful. But I'm kind of glad I was so young that I didn't really know any better. I didn't know how serious of a thing that was. So I went in and they made me I had to do the lip sync thing, and I brought my own ping pong ball eyes, which is like, I was that guy.
Such a brown noser.
It's disgusting thinking back about it. And then Jane.
You were prepared. It's
inexcusable. And so anyway, we had to lip sync. We did the counting in the mirror, and we went in groups of like 10. And then everybody got cut from my group of 10 except for me, and I was stood in the room by myself. And they wheeled out one of those metal TV stands from school, and it was and it had a monitor on it, and someone brought out a camera, and then they had me lip sync just to see if I could like play the frame and if I knew monitor.
At this point, had you ever done monitor stuff?
A little bit, because here's the other thing: we couldn't afford a camcorder. Any extra thing that we had was like really extravagant. We just couldn't afford things like that. So for years I had, whose camera did I have? I had my Uncle George's camera, and he was like a tech guy. And so he gave me an old camera that I was able to use and hook up. But I didn't start using monitors until like a year prior to my audition. I was just in the mirror, and I would.
Did you know that was how they did it? I mean, did you know that, I got to figure this out? And
I kind of just felt out of my reach. I just thought like, well, I can't do that. Like, how am I going to set this up? And like, it just, at that time, it was still at a point where that was a little bit inaccessible. If you didn't have the equipment, it was still a little
you didn't
tough.
have it.
Right.
How are you going to do it?
Right. And so, but I bet every year I asked, I was like, can we go to Rent-A-Center and get one? And we finally got, my uncle let me borrow one, so I was able to hook it up. But prior to that, I'd just done mirror, which actually was really valuable, because I think if I had started with monitor right away and had to learn eye focus and lip sync and composition and all that stuff, I think I would have thrown in the towel. I was glad that I had like 4 or 5 years of just puppeteering in a mirror, because then it becomes second nature,
Were you able to do that mental flip in that audition?
At that point, I kind of already knew about that. I kind of already knew how to, like, it didn't throw me so much. Because once I got that camera, that was it. I did it every day. I would come home from school and, like, drill it. And,
so you felt comfortable enough at this point at this audition when they wheel out this TV and you're like, yeah, okay, I can do that.
I felt fine. I certainly didn't feel comfortable, but I felt like, because it was such a simple task. It was just lip sync to a song and play the frame. I just thought, okay, that I can do. I wasn't confident in characters or anything like that. But and then in perfect fashion, it makes a lot of sense to me now. I finished my thing, and people were receptive, and I remember people had okay things to say. And Kevin just said to me, "Stay today, because I need to talk to you." I was like, okay. And I didn't know any better, but I stayed for about like 4.5, 5 hours, and I'm thinking, does he know? Does he remember that he said that? And I'm just watching people come and go, and I'm just like the kid waiting around. And finally, but the sun was setting, and I just thought, how much longer is this going to be? And finally, he came out, and he was done, and he had his brief, like he was ready to go. The car had been called, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry you asked me to stay." And he was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to use you on the parade, and you're going to do the next season, and someone in Henson will call you in a couple days."
Wait, what? That was
left.
That was you're one of us now.
Yep. And
you're going to be on the parade, and you're going to be.
You're going to do the parade, and you're going to do this, that, and the other. Come back tomorrow. Blah 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 blah. And I just thought, oh my God, that. Did
your brain just fall out of your ear at that point?
It did.
Did you think you didn't expect it?
I didn't expect it, and I just didn't know how to process it. Maybe I just
how could you?
And I also think it was one of those things where I didn't want to let myself believe it if it didn't happen. It was one of those where I was like, I know enough about this business to know that this might not be anything. So just wait it out. But I did immediately. I called my parents, and I did the whole thing, and then I did. I came back the next day for like a callback day with puppets and stuff. And then that November, the first thing I did was the parade. I did Ernie in the parade, and it was amazing.
What was the what year was that?
2005.
2005. And where were you? You must have been upstairs with Ernie.
I was upstairs. I was upstairs in that middle window, which is really hard with Ernie and Bert. I remember Eric looked at me and he goes, "You're gonna have to give me some room." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, no problem." And he was just messing with me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But during the whole performance, we were like kind of fighting for room because those are big puppets. Ernie and Bert are huge.
Yes, and small windows.
And they used to I don't know if they still do, but it used to be that they just stayed in one window together.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it. You know, there's a delay on them. I don't know if people know this, but when we're doing the parade, there's a delay on the monitors. So it's kind of challenging to do really good puppetry on it. And
I mean, any delay on the monitor is bad, but this delay is like a 3-second delay. It's an insane amount of delay. So by the time your shot comes up and you're like, oh gosh, there I am, it's already gone.
Were you in Bird the year that it was like maybe it was like a minute and a half before we were going to go to Macy's. We were going to land at Macy's, and the monitor switched, and it turned to the Dick Cavett show on Antenna TV. And Leslie and I are just sitting there watching him interview. I don't remember who. Danny Kaye. It was Danny Kaye. Like, oh, this is interesting. We're almost at Macy's. Anyhow, so that first year, I did Ernie, and I couldn't really see the monitor. You know, it's so tiny in the frame too.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it back on TV because my parents had recorded it. And it's just Ernie's... How do I explain this without seeing it? Like, I rested Ernie on the ledge of the window, like a dumb person would do. And so, like...
Or very smart.
Very smart man I am. And so, like, one of his hands is pinned, so that's, like, hanging out the window. You can see he doesn't have legs. And I was just like, oh, no, that's it. I'm not going to do the season. He's going to see this, and I'm not going to do the season.
I'm done. Because that is that fear of, like, when you're so new, that everything
counts.
that you do, is being looked at and picked apart.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not entirely true. Maybe it was at one point. But we do expect you to mess up, right? You know, you come to learn that over time. You're like, yeah, I can mess up. And it's okay.
I did.
But I totally get I totally get that feeling of, like, if I mess this up. And now you have it on, there's proof on national television.
So, it's somewhere in the NBC Universal Archives. You can find some really horrible puppetry.
But you made it through that.
I made it through. I had a great time, and I just kind of couldn't believe it the whole time. The whole thing was a bit of a blur. And then the next month was when I started at Sesame Street. I was there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks that first season, which was a substantial chunk of time at that point, because I think we were... I may not have been 26 yet. Maybe it was 26 shows in 2005. I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
It was something like that. If it wasn't 26, it was like 35. Or it was like a small number of shows.
But that's pretty good being there for that amount of time.
It was amazing. I mean, I really, really screwed up a lot. But I learned very quickly 2 things. I learned what television production was like. But I also learned how to work in a work environment. I never had a job, you know. And
this was your first job.
First job, which is very weird thinking back. And I actually think I was too young. I've thought about that a lot. I think.
Why do you think you were too young? Did you make mistakes that now you look back and go, I wish I hadn't?
That, and I
should have known, or how could
I just don't think I had the social awareness at the point. I think I was just too young. You know, I just didn't know enough about the real world of working at a job. I mean, it's the best job in the world, but, you know, it's a job. And so I think I learned a lot on the fly, and I was glad to do that. But I think I needed 2 or 3 more years to cook. You know, I just needed, and I think there was something to be said about like life experience and stuff like that. Because I was there for a couple of years, and then I wasn't there for a couple of years.
Now, was that your choice?
No.
Or was you just didn't hear back?
No, the phone stopped ringing. And I kind of just felt like, obviously the first thing you do is, what did I say?
Right.
Maybe he's just done with, you know, having me around. And it's probably none of those things specifically, but looking back, I go, I think I needed life experience. I needed to go out and have a point of view and figure out, you know, and I did. I went away, and I moved away from home, and had a puppet building company with at that time, my creative partner, Patrick Holmes. We had a puppet building company and a performing company. We did shows all over the place, and mainly we built puppets for outside clients.
At this point, had you already been to like the O'Neill?
Yeah, I think my first O'Neill was my first Sesame Street year, because I think Pam said, you should come do this thing. And I did that a couple times. I did the O'Neill a couple times, and it was valuable at that time. I think it was, for me, it was very valuable at that time to learn about the other puppetry styles, because
you're getting a lot of different flavors.
Yeah, and I was open to them, but I thought, well, I'll see. Maybe I'll gravitate towards something else, and it, it was valuable. Like, actually, it was valuable for tabletop, because you can't really teach yourself how to do tabletop puppetry, and you need people, and
you kind of need help.
Yeah, and so it was valuable for that kind of thing. But yeah, so I'd done the O'Neill. Puppets just kept happening for me, and it wasn't going away. And so I felt like, okay, well, that's the reason to stick with it. If I'm still thinking about this, and if I'm still, obsessed with it, that must mean something.
And you're now how old? Early 20s?
Oh, now?
No, not now. Then,
900.
Then.
I was, my first O'Neill, I was probably 18, and I did that, 18 to 21 maybe.
And at this time, you and Patrick also had your company. Yeah. And you were building puppets for outside clients. Were you doing anything else? Did you do any other kind of puppetry things?
I was working retail. I was working at Borders Books, and it was a bummer, man. I'll never forget my first week of working there. I was ringing up a DVD that I was in, and it was really a huge wake-up call.
A home video.
Yeah, it was like a Sesame DVD. Video. And I was like, oh, yeah, I worked on this 2 years ago. And, you can't say that to the person. They're like, that's nice. What's the total, please?
Sweet.
So, but it was I'm actually really glad I did it, because it gave me a lot of perspective about the real world, and, just how hard it can be.
Right.
But anyhow, so I did that for a year or two, and then was always building puppets. I moved back to Philadelphia when I was about 21 or 22. And then moved to New York when I guess I was around that age. I guess I was 22. Yeah, I would have been 22. And I moved to New York, and slowly things started to kind of creep up and happen. But it took a while. It wasn't like, I'm in New York, so here I am, Sesame Street. Right. Those things take time.
Do you remember that first thing that came to you when you did finally move to New York? And
the reason I came here was because John Tartaglia was doing a show.
Was doing Imagine Ocean?
Was doing Imagine Ocean off Broadway, and he asked me to come audition for it. So I auditioned for it, and then...
How had you known John Tartaglia?
So that's another part of the story. I met him right before the auditions for Sesame Street. Oh. Because he was doing puppetry workshops in the city, in Ripley Greer, actually, and I did those, and so we became friendly at that point. And he, I think, maybe had been like saying my name around Sesame and to Kevin and stuff, and as just like this is a kid in a couple years to look for. So I knew him from that, so he kind of knew what I was capable of at that point, and he asked me to come audition, so I auditioned, and then that's why I moved. Was because that show had started up, and I did that for about, I don't remember how long that was. It was less than a year, but it was the better part of a year.
And that was live on stage.
It was live on stage. It was like a black
8 times
light.
A week.
It was. Or
did you do
I'm trying to remember. It started out like 6 shows a week, and then it got like less and less, maybe to like 3 or 4 shows a week. And it was a fun time. I was really young, so I think I took a lot for granted too, and I when you're that age, it's hard to see things for what they really are.
We're going to pick up with Ryan Dillon in just a few minutes, but now it's time to take a moment and celebrate Jerry Nelson. Jerry had an amazing life, and it was filled with a lot of highs and lows. And today, we're going to hear about one of the highs. This story takes place in the 50s, long before Jerry met Jim Henson or found himself on Sesame Street. And this is a fair warning here. It is a story about an experience with drugs. John Kennedy is going to read that story, but first, a memory. Here's John.
One of my favorite memories of Jerry was back when I first started on Sesame Street, and I was doing a lot of couch surfing. I wasn't living in New York yet, and one night came along after work. I had no place to stay, so I decided to stay in the Muppet green room. And as Jerry Nelson was leaving the green room, he saw that I was kind of hanging out there, and he said, "Well, where are you going after this?" And I said, "Well, I'm just going to stay here because I don't have any other place." And he said, "No, you're not. You're coming home with me." So he drove me to his place, and I stayed in the spare bedroom, and I'll always remember his kindness. So here's Jerry's story. 1953, My Life in the Alternate Universe, Part 1. I think I became interested in drugs in high school. It was literature that first alerted me to the fact that there were drugs that could alter one's perception. In books about New York gangs, I learned of marijuana and heroin. I knew from reading about it that I was not going to go near heroin, but reefer interested me. For a year after graduating high school, I worked at the post office in Arlington, Virginia. I was still living at home then, and after work, I would come home, shower and shave, have dinner with my parents, and then go into Washington, D.C. to a little club in the heart of downtown named Rand's. I closed the place almost every night. I got to know the house band and the doorman. Tiny knew me by name. I went to after-hours parties and was once taken to a black club called the Caverns. I was always bugging those cats to try to score some pot. Now, this was in the 50s, and not to be bandied about. Not nearly so widespread and accepted as it was later. Well, after months of asking around, Willie the drummer sold me one thin Tootsie Pop stick-sized joint for $1. I was excited when I called my friend Mike and told him of my score. We had spoken of this before I knew Mike wanted to try this weed out too. I picked him up at his house, and we drove around Arlington looking for a quiet street to sit and smoke this herb we had read so much about. We finally settled on a small street with houses on only one side that was situated on a high hill that overlooked Lee Boulevard. We had some nice jazz on the radio. We lit up and sipped on it like it was described in the books. That's why they called it tea. By the time we got 3/4 of the way down the popsicle stick-like joint, we were thinking we had been played. "You feel anything?" I asked Mike. "No, do you?" "No," I replied. "I think we got burned." We just sat there a while feeling mellow, but somewhat disappointed. "Hey man, dig how the shadows of the leaves on the windshield are moving in time to the music." "Yeah, man, I was just grooving on that synchronicity." We sat there a while, mellowing even more. "Dig that light down the hill, man." "Which one?" "Oh, wow, you mean that blue one?" There was this intense electric blue neon light pulling our focus down the hill. That would be so cool in Bop Basement. Mike had his own apartment in the basement of his mom's house with a separate entrance around the side of the house. "Let's go down there and find it and take it." I started the car up and we headed off the hill to capture our fabulous blue light. It was down on Lee Boulevard, wasn't it? Yep, that's what it looked like. Well, we got down the hill and found our fantastically cool, intense blue light. It was at the hot shop and still beautifully blue. All 8 feet of the hot shop man sign on top of his 20-foot metal pole. I guess it wouldn't fit in Bop Basement even if we could get it down off that pole. We laughed and laughed. I guess maybe we did get a little high there, huh? Oh, yes.
Thank you, John. A little bit later, we hear a song from Jerry. We're back with Ryan Dillon talking about working on John Tartaglia's Imaginocean.
It was a really good experience for me because it forced me to live in New York, which is very different than commuting to New York. And
Yes.
I remember thinking, this is your test. Like, can you stand this? Can you stand living in New York? I think I was lucky because I lived in Philly. It wasn't that far removed.
Yeah.
I didn't live in the city of Philly. I lived like in a slight sort of suburb, but it wasn't a huge culture shock for me to come here. But there was a learning curve to that. And then I would just pick up building jobs whenever I could. I did a lot of puppet building in those first few years here just to make ends meet.
And after that show closed, did you think, okay, well, I'm here now. Now I have to, bust my butt to try to find more.
I was
more stuff.
It's funny how it kind of worked out because they were going to go do the tour of Imagination, and I was not asked to be a part of that tour, and I kind of felt like, oh boy, what am I going to do now? Because now it's this thing of, do I go home or do I stick it out and do the ramen thing? And I luckily, I mean, it just worked out to be. It was incredible how it worked out. The next day, Kevin called me, and I hadn't, I'd been in and out of Sesame at that point. When I was doing Imagination, I was around, but it was
a day here, a day there, home video,
right?
Little things, yeah.
And so he said, we're doing this new character, and I was going to do it, but I'm not going to do it. So I want you to come in and do it. And it was for I don't know how you describe it. It was for Xbox. It was a digital interactive game system with Xbox, and they needed a host. It was for Sesame Street, and they wanted a new character who was like a digital Muppet host. And so I came in and I did a couple of not auditions, but like read stuff. And I remember you and I worked together at Henson on stuff with it, and that was the first sort of like entry back into things full time.
What was that character's name? I don't remember.
His name was Cooper.
And it was all digital, right?
There was two versions of the puppet. So the one of the versions was a normal standard hand puppet, like a Muppet style puppet, who was really great. I wish we could have used him because he was a beautiful puppet. But he was just as a reference for the animators who were doing all the animation, like the post work on it and the rendering. They were doing all in London. So I think maybe they shipped that puppet over for like reference for the fur movement and stuff like that. That was one puppet. And then the other puppet was just a blank fleece puppet, same pattern, but with no fur. And it had tracking marks all over it. And in the studio, we shot it at what was Screen Gems at the time. And I think that's gone now. But they're all over the soundstage. It was a huge soundstage, and all over the stage were, I'm not going to get it right, but there were like these laser infrared cameras. And on every, let's say, 3 feet, there was a camera all the way wrapped around, which were reading the sensors on the puppet, so it got a full 3-dimensional view. So in post and in rendering, they could turn the puppet around if they wanted to. They could
do whatever they wanted.
And so
which is usually not the way that we like to perform.
We like
to perform where we know exactly what is being seen at home.
Yeah, and I actually said as much to Kevin. I thought, I don't know if are you going to be watching these when they're done? Because what are they going to do? And he said, yeah, we're worried about that too. We're concerned, but we're going to learn together and figure it out. And it ended up being like sometimes you would do a physical eye line that took a second for the render to catch up. So sometimes they would adjust your eye line quicker to basically the way I shot it was on two cameras? I can't remember now, but I had 2 feeds. I had the live feed where I could see what was happening in real time, and then right next to it, I had the rendered version, the real time, not rendered, but the real time version of the zeros and ones of the digital puppet.
It was a little bit of lag.
And it was like choppy and stuff, but it was just to give you a sense of, you had to overcorrect sometimes with your eye line, so it was really tricky. But I think it was really good because it got me to think in another way, and you kind of just had to do it.
But it was just you, too. I mean, it was you. It was
me, and Laura McLean did my hands, I think both times, because we did 2 quote-unquote seasons of it. We did about like 60 of them. But
that's a lot of hours on camera, or even if it's virtual camera, you are on camera getting experience and getting some feel, comfortability on camera.
Yeah, it was a lot of time on camera. It was the most valuable thing. And Kevin was there for, I don't know that he was there for the first round, but I think maybe he was there for the second round, and he kind of just like sat there and let me do my thing. And he didn't really,
Yeah.
you know, Kevin very much would tell you if he felt something wasn't going the right way, he would tell you how to do it. And I kind of thought,
Yes.
oh, he's going to not be happy with anything I'm doing. And to his credit, he kind of just sat there and let me do it, you know? And I think it was just his way of saying, how is this kid handling this? And can he do it?
And was that your first character that you were able that you had done for Sesame Workshop?
I mean,
really?
I'd done like AMs with like too long, you know what I mean? Like little bitty stuff. But as far as a character was concerned, yeah. And then there was this basketball puppet that he had me do. This like, it's Crystal Ball now. We use it as Crystal Ball, but it was this orange foamy puppet that was with Elmo. So it was this ball puppet that was in Elmo's hands for days and days and days. And so whenever he whipped around, I had to whip around. You know, it was it was one of those kind of things. But
keep up with Kevin.
And it taught me really fast. I mean, that was the nice thing about it. You didn't really have time to worry about how well you were doing. And I mean, it's probably really, I'm sure if I watched it now, it'd be really hard to watch, but it taught me really quickly about, you know, because at that point I still was figuring out who my characters were. Like I didn't have cemented characters yet because I was 22, 21. I just didn't have it in me. So it was a huge learning curve, but it was really fun. I have a lot of happy memories from that time because it just felt like, okay, here we go. This is something.
Yeah, and you're able to do that and put away a little money, and were you still doing puppets on the side, creating puppets for other clients? And
was I doing it for? I must have been. Yes, I was making puppets for outside clients. But I think what was interesting, the timing of it worked out in an interesting way, where the puppet building, that business started to crumble right at the time that I was starting to get puppeteering work. So like, there were a couple years there where I had clients like one after another making puppets, and then it just all dried up immediately. It just stopped. Like across the city, I think, you know, it's that thing where puppets come in waves. People get really excited about puppets, and then they're not, and then they are. And so maybe it was just at the end of one of those waves. So it was kind of serendipitous that it happened that way because I wasn't getting as much building work as I had been. And I wasn't enjoying it. You know, it was good to make all those puppets for the 10,000 hours part of it. You know, you have to get enough work experience to get good at it. But I was working with other people's designs, and when you work with clients, it's not necessarily the most creative way to make puppets.
When did you start doing your own puppets for yourself?
I kind of always had, when I started making puppets, I would always have little characters for them, but it was never anything substantial. You know, when I started building puppets, I had a little group of characters that kind of didn't do
they were your guys.
Yeah, but they were very, you know, they weren't very strong characters at that point, but they had little personalities. But then my first real character that I did was when I moved to Scranton. And it was one of Patrick's puppets, actually. It was an owl puppet that I kept pushing him to finish because I would come visit him every couple weeks, and I'd see it on he had this beautiful puppet rack with all these puppets on it. And I saw this owl head, and I said, oh, so what's that? And he goes, oh, I'm working on an owl puppet because I might be doing something with the local PBS affiliate. And I said, oh, that's cool. And leave and come back, and it hadn't been finished. And I'd say, you got to get working on that puppet. And this happened about 3 or 4 times. And one weekend I said, we are making this puppet, okay? If I have to make it, I'm going to make it. We are making this puppet because I just saw something in it. There was a really cool design of an owl. So we built that puppet, and that became a character that I started doing, a character called Phoebe that who is ridiculous. It's very stupid. And but I would just bring her places. Like we would go to we were in the improv scene and that, tiny little art theater scene. And so I'd start taking her to stuff and improvising with people and filming it. And, just to get a sense of I really wanted to hone a style where it was really conversational, and because I wasn't a writer. So I thought, well, I like this idea of the off-the-cuff improvisation style. Because when I was a kid, I was always really attracted to when Frank or Dave would be on the Today Show, and maybe they're a little tired and they're not reading the jokes that they were given, and they're just kind of, that was something that was really appealing to me. So that was my first real character, and that was my first. I got laughs, and I thought, oh, I can do characters. I just didn't think I was good enough for a long time, and I think that's a common thread, right? Like Frank would say, he didn't do voices for a long time, and
Had you taken any acting classes or even any improv classes up to this point, or were you just winging it?
A little bit of both, like nothing super formal, like I was in the world of improv people, so I had done that kind of thing, but on a very local level. It wasn't, I hadn't really trained. And as I say, when I was in high school, and I didn't go to college because, at that time of deciding whether I was going to go to college, that's when Sesame Street kind of started to happen. Yeah. And, I had to make a choice, and for whatever, good or bad, that was the choice I made. So I never really had real acting training. I just pulled from the things that I loved, and I've always been a studier of like sketch comedy. Like SNL was a huge deal for me. I mean, that was appointment television for me, and even if it wasn't good, you know what I mean? I loved, I was watching when it was like Chris Farley and all those people, and that was what really appealed to me. People with bold, huge characters. And so it was less, I had less formal training and more just sort of study of people's performances.
Yeah. And there's some instinct there too, that you just kind of, and if you're successful at making and creating this bold character, I mean, you're doing it. You're doing the thing that you're setting out to do.
And there's a lot to be learned from watching, too, because I remember even when I was younger, I would think, oh, they dropped their cue, or like they didn't, and so that I think I kind of learned that way just by sort of observing, especially.
That is a key component, I think, to being a Muppet performer, is being observant of everything, of comedy, of the tiny little movements that puppeteers that you admire do, the way that they deliver a line, even beyond the puppeteer world, to be an observer of life, of the world, of people out there and characters out there that you can go, I could take that and do something with it.
And it's funny because when I was really young, when I met Jerry Nelson, he had said things like that. He was like, go to the park and like watch squirrels and like watch a chicken and like see how they, all those kind of, and it is there's something really valuable about just kind of being open and observing. I'm a studier anyway. Like I find social experiments fascinating. I'm fascinated by people and why they, I always thought psychology was always something I wanted to maybe enter into if I didn't do puppets or cartoons. And so I think that helped a lot. I think it helped. And then later when I was developing my own characters, I kind of figured out why I was making the choices I was making. Like what internally within me, why was I making these characters this way? And it sort of makes you think about
What do you think it is that's the most important thing? If you had to pick one thing, what's the most important thing when you're creating a character?
Just be really honest with yourself. I think you kind of have to look inside. And for me, it's different for everybody, but for me, it's a harsh way to say it, but it's the only way that makes sense to me. I used to take the things I didn't like about myself and try and make them either a positive and push them through a character, or I think you just have to look internally, and it kind of didn't. Sometimes the best characters are the organic ones where you don't have it's not a construct. It's not, okay, I'm going to create a little boy and he's 6 and he loves Legos, but he always eats them and blah, blah, blah. You have all this stuff, but it doesn't. The most natural characters are the ones that just kind of happen. And for me, it was just listening to myself and being honest with myself as far as not pushing characters that didn't feel real to me. If I didn't have any sense of where that character came from, it wasn't making any sense. It's hard to describe. It's not tangible. No,
but I know what you mean. And everybody's kind of different. Jerry would say that, he would take that part of something, all those characters that Jerry did, they came from him. It was, and who he was, it was just taking that aspect of whatever it is, like for the Count, he is obsessive about numbers, and he would just take that part of being obsessive about whatever it is and blow it up. Mm-hmm. And that's what he did with his characters. He would just make that
amplify
that little physical or mental or whatever attribute and just blow it up into this big, bold character.
And those are the characters I was always really into, especially like everything SNL, but like Muppets too, like, bold characters and people who could only who could only be themselves. Like like people like Jerry, like Joey comes to mind. People who are like unabashedly just themselves, and I always found that really appealing because you could pick them out in a crowd, and they were adding something to that group. No one sounds like, no one sounds like so and so. Only Jerry could do Jerry, and there's something really exciting to me about that. And I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to do characters too. I just thought I really want to add that kind of thing. And it took a while for me to figure out.
And I'd say definitely you do that.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say.
It does take a while, though. It does take a while to kind of figure out how to do it, for whatever way it means for any individual, how to create these characters in whatever way it is, whether it is taking a part of yourself or whether it is seeing something in something you're observing and taking that and making it into something.
And now it's the venue, too. It's like,
while.
what venues do you have to do it in? You have to kind of be a self-starter because, for a long time, the way it was, you would go in and do your AMs, and then you'd figure out, oh, that character's funny. We're going to start writing for that character. And that kind of more shows afforded the ability to do that. And now it's a smaller cast, and it's just the nature of the beast. But so for me, it was a little bit about, I kind of thought I would learn all those things on Sesame Street, and that wasn't the case really. But I learned who my characters were, and I don't have it figured out. It's a process always, and every time I watch stuff, I think, oh God, it's horrible. You are pushing. You were at 11 the whole time. So I'm always analyzing. But I think it was helpful for me to have characters to go to Sesame Street with, right? So I could pull out, like, I've got like my little stable of characters, and I could pull that character out and use it for this pig or whatever. Yeah. But I didn't develop them there. They kind of all happened because I felt the need to make them, and I felt the need to create them, and I just did it by myself for YouTube and stuff.
Does this bring us to then talking maybe about? We'll come back to Elmo because I do feel like
I forgot about him.
Sort of
that guy.
But I do think that this is a good time to talk about maybe the Idiot Club.
Sure.
Just tell us what the Idiot Club is, basically, for those of you who don't know.
Right. The Idiot Club is a group of characters. It's always really hard to describe these things. People are so much better at it than I am, and it's my thing. But Mark Gale and I, who I met at a Puppeteer workshop for Sesame Street, actually, in 2006. And we were paired together, and we became really fast friends, and we had lots of very similar interests and a very similar sense of humor. He's got like a weird, dry, but also big sense of humor, bold, big, but also dry, and we just clicked. And so we had decided we were going to work together after that. And he had a character already called Frank the Horse that he was doing with Frankie Cordero, so I helped him with that. And really I was helping him like with the writing and the directing. I mean, it was very much like, let's get a camera and shoot stuff in the house. It wasn't a real thing. It was just, let's play and see. It was just for us, we never really thought anything of it. And then as we were developing stuff, it just kind of naturally happened that I started coming up with characters, and they all came from different reasons. They all came out of different things. But it just made sense for us to combine our characters and do something with it. So the Idiot Club basically is, we have an Instagram page, and that's mostly where we do stuff. But it's just a place for us to get our characters out there. So it's, weird improv monologue-y things.
And it's these bizarre characters, these weird, funny characters. And you guys have created the characters. You're writing them. I mean, they're produced pieces. How do you create those?
So we kind of do everything ourselves because we're not good at asking for help, and there's something really appealing to me about kind of being a little studio in a box. There's something exciting about that. But it also, I've always used it as an opportunity to learn. I was like, oh, this is how I figure out how to direct, and this is how I figure out how to write. And I'm still not a very strong writer, but
disagree.
Well,
I disagree with you.
You know what I mean. It's just like it's not my thing. But Mark and I, we goof off. We talk every day, and we would just sit there and do stupid voices to each other all day. And we thought, well, let's just do something with this, even if it doesn't get any attention, and even if people don't see it, let's just do it. And let's do the thing that we're not seeing a lot of with puppets. Let's do that thing that we wish we were seeing more of. And it ended up just kind of being this weird off-the-cuff... it's hard to describe. I mean, I hate saying that it's avant-garde because it just seems so highfalutin, but it's not... it's character study. It's all these, it'll be 2 minutes of one of my characters going on about some weird thing.
But it's some absurdity. There's some absurdity
it's absurd,
there, which is good. I mean, that's kind of like what Jim Henson did back in the early days, and even with the Muppets. There was some absurdity to it. It was not just what you would expect.
Right.
And all kinds of bizarre things happen in these videos.
It's a fun little thing to do, and it's just a nice outlet to get my stuff out of my brain. A lot of times what'll end up happening is, as far as how they're produced, sometimes it starts with something that we've riffed on that we'll then pull together and write a script on. Sometimes it's improvised. Sometimes it's I'm thinking about something, or something has pissed me off that day, and I go to the microphone and I start talking in a character and it comes out. And a lot of the things work out that way, where it's like a pre-recorded monologue that I will then shoot footage for and edit down. And sometimes there was a series that we did where we were supposed to shoot this big giant thing at Mark's house, and it kind of just fell through. We ran out of time, and I said, okay, well, I'll take Kip, one of my characters, I'll put him in the back seat, and you get in the front seat, you start driving around, and we'll just film it, and we'll see what happens. And it ended up being really fun and stupid, and that's kind of what it is. As far as producing, it ends up just being, everything's down and dirty, which is kind of how I like it. We actually shot a pilot. It was a huge production. It was very expensive, and it was looking, the prospects were very high for something happening and stuff. And we actually realized, it looks too good. It's too expensive looking.
It looks too good.
It looks too good. It looks too much like the Muppets almost. Like it just, when you get higher production value, it part of the charm goes away. And so, just for us, it would just felt like, it kind of needs to be like in the basement. It needs to, but with some sort of panache to it. So, anyhow, very long-winded, strange way of describing what it is, but it's just an outlet for us to get our characters out there, because, we got to get it out.
I mean, do you have any kind of bigger scale dream for the
the dream's always been to do the show, and it's hard. We've gotten close a couple times, and it's just hard to sell puppets, man. It
really is.
We've gotten really close, and then gotten really far, and really close, and really far, and so we're trying to figure out what that means right now, and because listen, it's a huge gamble for a network to buy a puppet show. Puppets are super expensive, even if you do them cheap. And it's not a known quantity, right? It's not like, the whole first season ends up being your proof of concept. And then that, it's,
right.
It ends up being
but then
really
even
expensive.
then, when you are Sesame Street or the Muppets, it's not always,
right.
You're not always a surefire hit,
right.
Yeah. And you can't just always walk through the door and say, hey, we're the Muppets.
And and you have to
hope, that's cool.
Yeah, and you got to hope that whoever is in charge of making those decisions is a Muppet fan or loves Muppets or gets them, and so it's a tricky thing. Right now, we spent a year or two thinking really big and doing the whole thing and doing the meetings and stuff like that, and that was fun. But right now we're just focusing on doing things small, because I think there's something really valuable in the social media, making small digestible videos. And I think it's the way puppets work really well for social media, because
they do. And in small
you're
doses.
In and out.
And something about what I've noticed just in how you edit it and deliver it. I mean, there are these little, that feels so, to me, so much how people put out content now. Like there's a little flash of something that comes up, like a tiny little flash of like, I don't know, stick of butter or something. And then just ridiculous little, almost in a way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Monty Python and a little bit of, I can't think of the other thing, but they're just this absurd, hilarious videos to me.
Some of it, we've talked about it before, about why. because I just always gravitated toward that style of editing. I think some of it's my ADD, because I think I'll flash of something in my brain, and I thought, oh, that will put a punctuation on that joke, because a lot of our jokes are not like set up punch but bum. It's just the delivery of a line, and it's very conversational, and sometimes you need the punctuation of a flash of something. And another component is like I really loved, like when I was in high school, I discovered Frank Zappa, and I just loved his approach to it was all kind of interpretive, like his stuff. And I've always responded to things like that. Like, like I liked Salvador Dali when I was in high school. It's all kind of interpretive. You can take it for what it is, and you could take away from it whatever your personal opinions are of it, and it can mean whatever it wants to mean for you. So there's a little bit of that. Also, I think it was a deliberate stylistic choice to get it one step removed from other puppet things, because it's already hard enough to justify to people why things are not the Muppets. Right. So, and it's just a style that it's the devil I know in terms of the puppetry style. So then you have to almost compensate for that and say, well, what stylistic choices are we making that are going to be different than that?
Yeah, because it doesn't look like any, how we do Muppet stuff, and it doesn't look like how we do Sesame Street stuff.
It's made in a mental institution.
I love whenever I see them come up on my little feed. I always listen to them and watch them. They're so funny.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
And you and Mark and Frankie Cordero.
And Frankie, I got to say, Frankie's a huge part of it too. Frankie's so funny, man. He is.
And oftentimes just plays Frankie.
And he's just Frankie. He's a great character. He's such a good character. And Frankie does great characters too, but we just gravitated towards him because he's a great neutral figure. He's just like the sane one in this group of crazy people. But yeah, I've been working with Frankie forever. I've known him for a super long time, and so we're buddies. Yeah. He's the best.
It's time for a Jerry song. Today's tune, like many of the others, can be found as full band renditions on Jerry's album Truro Daydreams. Pick it up, give it a listen, it's great. But today, this is an acoustic version of a song called Alligators.
Alligators from hell. Well, I was standing in the desert with my gun in my hand. Didn't do me no good. Here they come again, after me again, like I knew they would. Alligators from hell, all got me under their spell. Alligators from hell, well, I don't feel very well. I run up on the mountain thinking to fox them out, but didn't do me no good. They were sitting there waiting with a grin on their chin, like I knew they would. Alligator backbite. It just ain't right. Alligators hiss raw. Oh my God, here comes some more. Yeah, I went to the ocean thinking to get away at last. Didn't do me no good, no. Time for getting away is past. Time is moving fast. Help me on my way if you could. From alligator backbite. Oh, it just ain't right. Alligators alligating. They're stirring up hating. Yeah, I went out to LA, was in July. I gotta say, hey, didn't do me no good, no. Them alligators is hip. They take you on a hip trip, snap you up when they could. Alligators from space. Oh my God, alligator types all over the place. Alligators hiss raw. Oh my God, they're at the door. I went to see the doctor. He said, son, you're really sick. I said, hey, doctor, that don't do me no good, no. All I'm saying, please, can't see the forest for the trees. He said, help me on my way if you could. He said, alligators don't bite. I know that ain't right. Yeah, I seen it in the stars, in my alligator scars. So I went to see the wizard, said, gee whiz, what can I do? He said, I tell you and you know it's true, you do. You gotta jump straight in the middle of your own internal riddle. Hey, you know it's only up to you, else alligators might roam. Yeah, maybe get you at home. He said every time you fall from grace, there'll be a snapping in your face. Snap, snap. Well, I jumped inside my head and had a look just like he said. Hey, I think it did me some good. The alligators didn't mind, 'cause they had other fools to find. So keep an eye out round your neighborhood. Why, alligators from within. Yeah, 'cause that's how they begin. Alligators from hell. I don't fall under their spell. Yeah, I'm gonna get my hat and dump on down the road here. Don't be giving me none of them crocodile smiles. I heard all that jive before. Yeah, hey, I'll see you later, alligator.
That's Jerry Nelson. We'll have more songs and stories from Jerry on upcoming episodes of Below the Frame. And now back to my interview with Ryan Dillon. Well, we should talk about probably the most famous character that you play. And that is, of course...
Don Music.
I was going to say the sensitive nosed dwarf.
Oh my God.
Muppet Wiki.
That's right. Yeah. And no, it's Elmo. That was 2013. Mm-hmm. Right? What went through your mind when there was a call that said, hey, we want you to come in and audition for Elmo?
What was going through my mind? I didn't think I was going to do it. I didn't think I was going to go in. That's what I remember feeling. I think that maybe the call came from you. It must have. Or maybe, I don't remember. But I remember thinking, I don't know. I just can't do that. I just remember thinking, I can't. Elmo was never a character that I felt comfortable. You know, I had done the puppet a little bit, like we all have, you know.
Right.
And, if Kevin was directing or something, he'd throw the puppet to me, and in the same way that you had been doing stuff like that as well, so I knew how to move the puppet enough, but it still was like, you know, Kevin's manipulation style was like so specific and so crisp, and the character was so unique to him, and it was just never something I considered.
Right.
So I sort of fought with myself internally a lot about even going in, and then I went in, and it's kind of a blur. I just remember it being you, me, and Joey in a room with Elmo and Murray riffing. There must have been scripts, but I don't remember them.
I don't either.
And it was just all so weird. It was just a weird time personally, and it was hard to know what was going to happen. And I think, you know, I maybe did one. I must have done like a callback, and it just kind of happened from there. But it certainly was. It's funny what life gives you and what you choose to do with it, because I never could have anticipated that character or that job.
No, how could you? You know, none of us do.
Right.
You know, even when you're back, you're a kid, and you see those puppeteers, Jim and Frank and Dave and Jerry and Richard, and you're thinking, that they do that.
Yes,
that's what they do. That's their job. How do I fit into that? I don't do that. That's not me. I can't do that. I would never assume that I could have taken over Big Bird. I never would have thought.
Right, because none of us, I think, and I would imagine you probably had a similar thought process when you were thinking about these things. Like, I always thought, oh, well, the way it works is they develop new characters, and those performers play those characters, and it comes from them. And, you know, you just kind of think, I will add my characters to this group of characters. And what has kind of happened, just because of the nature of the medium and the way television and the internet is produced, you know, you need to have a small stable of characters. And what ends up happening is now the job has kind of become that we take on legacy characters. So it's sort of a different mindset almost. You have to kind of put your brain in a different gear. It uses a lot of the same principles, but there's a lot of different skills involved or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there are differences in creating a role from nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and then also taking over for someone.
Right.
You know, and how do you make that still that character? How do you make Elmo still Elmo, but not make it be just an imitation? Because it cannot be just an imitation. It has to be alive. And do you hear that sound?
Very, very faintly.
Somebody's mowing outside my window right there.
Keep it in. Keep it in.
Anyway, but what I was saying was taking over a role and making that thing yours while not stepping on who the character is a little tricky.
It's hard. And I've had to I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about this too, because you've had to do it a lot with lots of different characters. For me, I started to give myself a little bit of a break. For the first year or two, it was very much an impression, and it was like, oh, okay, well, he goes up on the end of a thing. You know what I mean? It was very clinical.
But that was your way in.
It had to be. And I think also it just had to be, just for continuity's sake, it had to fit in with the rest of those shows. So you had to get as close as you could. And also for me, it was almost like, get it out of the way. Like, do your 10,000 hours of the mimicking to get that part out of the way. And you know, it does happen. You get outside opinions from people who everyone's got opinions about these characters because and rightfully so.
We're all trying to help, because I do remember, like, early on we were like, you know, maybe I don't know that Elmo does this.
Yes.
And we would do that a little bit, and it was all like, you were very gracious, and you were like, okay, thanks, and you would kind of take the note. Well, and it was
important because everybody was at the same, that's the thing, everyone was trying to hit the same exact target. So what was frustrating about it was that I didn't feel that I was there yet, and I knew what needed to happen, but I just didn't have the tools. So there... And also, you know, I remember, I love her so much. I don't think she's going to mind me telling this story, but Carolyn Parente early on came up to me and she just goes, just remember that he's 3.5. Because my Elmo's like a 47-year-old 3.5. But
you know, Kevin would do that too. He would go on, like, you know, the Tonight Show or whatever he would do, and he would kind of age him up a little bit to make it funnier for adult audiences.
There's something about, it's hard. I have a hard time doing kid characters, because they always end up being smarter than they're supposed to be. They always end up saying things that, because it's just so off the cuff. And so that, I guess that's part of that thing of like just accepting it and like, yes, it's different now. But as you say, it kind of has to be different. It has to, not different, but you have to, it's very hard to keep a character going and do a number of things. Make the audience believe that character's real. Please the people who love these characters so much, and make it your own. I think there's value in making it your own, you know, and all of us have kind of taken the root of a character and said, how does that apply to my life? In the sense that, like, tons of people have played Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, you know, like, I don't know why I'm using that reference, but like there are these, you know, there are people, it's everybody's interpretation of a character.
It is, yeah. And in the same way, it's just so much harder because it is that actual puppet. Like, it's that actual physical foam and fur and feather creation that people literally grew up with and learned the alphabet or learned kindness with. And you're trying to now take that and be that, but also you have something to contribute. Yeah. You know, if you didn't let who you were or are creep a little bit into that character, it's just going to be stale and it's not going to be fun to watch or to perform.
Yeah. And you just have to hope that the audience is going to be cool with it. That was another part of it. I just thought, well, it's funny. I made the mistake of reading things early on, and I learned very quickly, don't read. Just don't read the stuff, because people can be tough. And to your point, I get it, because I was that kid who was, you know, obsessed with every little thing, and it means a lot to people. It means a lot to these characters are like so personal. They're like family members. So I just had to trust myself enough to say, I'm going to make these choices. And actually, it was very helpful to get away from I think it was like the second year that I'd been doing Elmo. I went to England to do a co-production called the Furchester Hotel with, which was really challenging because, and I think looking back, I should have enjoyed it a little bit more, but it was a little scary because it was two things. One thing was freeing, that I didn't feel the pressure of a lot of people watching me who have worked on the show for X number of years. But at the same time, I was a little bit in the woods. Like, I didn't I didn't really have a barometer of any, like, is this right? Am I doing this right? Is it was a double-edged sort of thing. But it allowed me to take some of those liberties a little bit.
And you also had David Rudman there,
Yeah.
who would come in every month or so, or I forget how
David
often
had
he
the
came in,
best
but-
job on that show because I was so jealous of him because he would come in and Cookie Monster would enter the scene and eat a cookie and he'd be done for the day. He'd be in one scene. I am in every shot
You're
of
in
that
everything.
show.
Yeah.
And he would come in and do his little thing and then the rest of the day he could work on spiffy stuff in his room and I'm like, how are you getting away with this? This is amazing.
Yeah.
But no, he was really, really kind and very patient. That's the thing. People are very patient with me and I think because it was scary. There was a lot of parts of it that were scary because I also was like, okay, this is your thing now. This is going to be on your obituary. This will be the thing, which is like super dark, but this will be the thing that people know you for, whether you're ready for that or not. So you have to go full force into it and then really make it something that you feel happy doing and comfortable doing. And a lot of that was allowing myself to come out. And, a lot of it was doing those appearances and doing Fallon and doing all those shows where you could kind of... And everybody was super... I mean, you guys were all so generous and kind and patient. And I can only imagine how weird that whole experience was. Like, I remember you and Joey and all people just being really kind and helpful. So it was just a weird way to be thrust into that situation. I didn't expect it, and I never anticipated it. But it's been amazing.
You were working with people like Louise Gold.
Yeah.
And she certainly had some experience over the years.
It was...
How cool.
It was amazing. It was... God, Louise is incredible. It was so scary going into... I was like moving to England for the summer. I'd never been to England. I didn't know what I was doing. And she was so open. Like, we were... The first day of rehearsals, she was at the front door with her arms wide open waiting to hug me. She didn't know me. But it was just such a... Again, it was that thing. I don't think I could have gotten comfortable if people, like you guys and like Louise and David, and if there wasn't this element of, like, you're going to be fine. You'll be okay.
Yes.
Just you're getting there. And... but it's been an amazing experience. It was a little bit like you don't have something else too. I didn't really have time to super panic about it. There wasn't a lot of time between getting the job and starting the job. There was no waiting around.
That's true. Yeah, you're kind of being thrown into the pond.
Yeah.
Thrown to the wolves.
Yeah.
Put your feet are put under the fire.
My feet were put under the fire.
Whatever, all those things.
A fourth thing.
Yeah, and then another one.
But it's been an amazing experience. It's a trip, man. You just do. I mean, you do things that you never would. I met Barack Obama. It's just
insane.
You know what I mean? And I've got that picture of all of us with Michelle Obama. But it's bizarre. Yeah. It's just there's experiences that you get to have that you never could have imagined.
And you performed all over the world with Elmo.
Yeah.
You've performed not only in the UK, but you've been to
I've been
Australia.
to the Philippines. I've been to Manila. I mean, crazy.
It takes you places that you'd never think that you'd get to go
at all.
Or that you ever find yourself.
It's incredible, and it's been the most fun thing in the world. I mean, it really is. It's the dream job because it's I mean, it's you're getting to be the person who does these characters for people, and you get to be the person who keeps it going. And you can only hope that people are happy with it, but you just go out and you perform and have fun, and it's crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah. And now you get to do, not only have you done Sesame Street for several seasons now, but now Elmo has his own show.
That's right. Elmo does have his own show.
He's got the Not Too Late show.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because it's a very different format. It's very comedy based. It's less curriculum based, which is kind of fun to do with these characters.
Mm-hmm. It was a blast. I had a lot of fun. Because it kind of went back to my roots. It kind of went back to my roots of like talking about doing stuff with Phoebe the owl and going to improv shows or just harassing my friends with this puppet. Like it kind of went right back to that way that I was really comfortable working, where there's a loose idea of what we're going to do, but you're just chatting to somebody with a puppet, and some really fun stuff can come from that. I mean, we had Jason Sudeikis, who was amazing. We had a lot of people who not only understood sketch, they also understood buying the reality of this world.
Yeah. I felt like you were so loose in that show. You, Ryan, were so just loose and comfortable, and that made Elmo feel really loose and comfortable as well.
Yeah, I think that's there's a lot to that, I think. I spent a lot of time being way more, what's the word I'm looking for? I spent a lot of time being a lot less comfortable than I could have been. And I think it affects the work. I think it, once you're able to bring your shoulders down and say, okay, let's just have fun, and
oh yeah,
there was something really valuable about that. And I also really like working without a net. It's my favorite thing, and I kind of like, there's something fun about, when we do like those press junkets, like throwing each other under the bus and seeing what's going to happen, you know what I mean? Just like goofing off with each other. And there's something about that I really, and that's what this whole show kind of became. We would have a set, if I was interviewing, who was on the show? If I was interviewing, I'll just say Jason Sudeikis. If I'm interviewing Jason Sudeikis, they'll have, a couple little things that we want to hit that are definitely going to be in the show, within the this scene of the chat part of it. But it really meandered, and as the season went on, we did a lot more meandering. And I had I think I had a quad split most of the time, so I could see what all of the for people who may not know, obviously we have monitors that we're watching our performance, but usually what we're watching is what we call the program feed, which is exactly what the camera's, what's going to go home, the cuts when they're cutting in the control room.
That way you can adjust your performance to that shot to make it look good. It's
exactly
an essential part of being a Muppet performer.
Essential.
But you had the quad split.
I had the quad split. So sometimes on films, and I think maybe you guys did it for Muppets and stuff, if there's a lot of cameras, especially in a scenario where anything could, in a talk show format, they could need to cut a huge chunk of something that doesn't work. So what that means is you need to see all four cameras to know if they're cutting to a close-up when I don't think they're going to cut to a close-up. Elmo's got to look good in that close-up. So I was seeing the wide shot. Usually I was seeing the close-up shot of the guest, and I was seeing my close-up Elmo shot. So it was sort of a different way of working in that respect, but it was also kind of freeing. And I love the loose... And David, it's great to have David there, too, because he's... Cookie Monster's the co-host. He's like the Ed McMahon, and he would come up with great stuff, and we would just... we'd look at each other and say, oh, you want to riff on this thing? Okay. And then we would just do it. And... it was a blast. I hope we get to do more. I just think, and
I do too.
The energy on the floor was really fun and loose and positive, and it was a great balance of comedy and some curriculum that felt like it dovetailed really well. But really, it's a show for everybody. It's for the whole family. There was some great musical numbers. You shot some amazing stuff on that show. It was just, I had a blast. I hope we get to do more.
I do too. It was so much fun, and it was a great collaboration from the Muppet performers to our producers and writers, and even the guests that would come on, and they would have great ideas. It was so much fun.
It really was.
And I do look forward to doing more of those. Is there a dream Sesame Street project that you think that you'd like to do? I mean, you've kind of done a lot of stuff.
I've been super lucky, man. I've gotten to do a lot of really cool stuff. And I don't take it for granted, because I could have easily not been in any of those things. But Sesame Street specifically, I have an idea that I've always wanted to do for Sesame Street. I want to do a show that's the other side of the street. Who lives on the other side of Sesame Street? So it's where the bike shop is now. But we've been really lucky to do, all of those old, weird, classic characters. That's been a real dream to do stuff like that and carry that.
Right. And you've done Don Music.
Don Music, and it's kind of become really ridiculous. He's only come back because I keep putting him on my arm and forcing him into things. But it's a dream Sesame Street project. That's a really good question. And it's a hard one to answer because we've done some really cool stuff. I'll tell you what the dream Sesame Street project would be. I just want to do inserts. I want to do a show of new inserts where we could do those wall bits. And because I got to do a fair amount of
just
those.
Inserts.
It's just inserts.
Maybe you have a Bert and Ernie insert.
Yes. Eric and I half jokingly have talked several times about doing Herbert Birdsfoot and him doing Grover and doing those old bits. I'd love to do inserts again because I got to do some towards the tail end. Right before Elmo, I got to do some AMs and inserts and stuff and got to have that thing. But it was kind of on its way out by the time I was there all the time. And it was my favorite thing to watch on the show. You know, Eric and I have sort of half jokingly said, okay, I'll be Herbert Birdsfoot and you be Grover. And we'll do we'll do some of those new old bits. And it's always, I love those things. I love, because it's, I'm sure you're in a similar boat. Like, to me, it was like sketch comedy for kids. It was like my Abbott and Costello and I love that stuff too, obviously, but there's something about those little bits and they're so satisfying. Those stupid buttons, the whole package is really appealing. So if I had a dream thing, it would be to just do a bunch of those with maybe old existing characters that we bring back, Don obviously, but also to develop new characters. That would be another dream. I think, unfortunately, just the model of entertainment in the industry right now, you need to fulfill a certain thing. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of characters we could be doing that, but there's just not enough time to do them. But I think I would love to see us develop our own original new characters that we create.
That'd be fun. Let's talk about Muppets for just a second. I mean, I know you're a huge Muppet fan, and you got to perform with us at the Muppets Take the Bowl, and then when we took that show over to the UK and did the Muppets Take the O2.
It was the best thing ever. I think it's in my top 3 for sure. That was...
Oh, really?
Oh, my God, yeah.
What did you do in that show? I mean, I was
all over the place, but what I really liked about it was I was just utility. Like, I kind of miss being utility. Because you're not...
That's what happens when you are the top dog.
Yeah.
You oftentimes can't just go and mess around.
I really like right-handing, and I really like doing background and filling in. Like, it's just... I like the challenge of filling in for a performer. But I was all over. I did a bunch of I got to do Floyd for Bohemian Rhapsody. That was unbelievable. I was like, I can't believe I'm in the bandstand doing this thing, and it was it's just silly little things. It was the kid in me. I got to do that thing because all of us, I think, at the end we all just want to do the Muppet Show. And
yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
That's
like, really,
everybody
just wants to be on the Muppet Show, and it felt so close to that. And just, it was an incredible experience I'll never forget, just being in those arches. And it's one of those things that, you guys are in those arches all the time. But it's for me, you know what I mean?
Really.
Like, you're smoking a cigarette in the back on, like,
yeah, sure.
These arches again.
If only we were in those arches all the time. Who knows? Maybe.
No, but it just really meant a lot to me to check it off the list, and also I really cried, like ugly, like man cried at the end of those shows. And I remember Rudman gave me a great big hug. It was really sweet, but I just couldn't believe it. It was an incredible experience. Yeah, and I've done little assisting. We got to do that Steve Martin thing together.
Yes,
that was amazing.
That was so much fun.
And I can't remember. Did you meet him at the end of it?
No, I didn't get to meet Steve Martin. No, I wish that I could have. But we did this. Steve Martin was being honored by the Drama League in 2017, and they had asked if Kermit could come and sing a song, and they wanted him to sing the song from The Jerk that he sings with Bernadette Peters.
Tonight You Belong to Me.
Yeah, Tonight You Belong to Me. And so I asked Ryan if he would come and assist me with that, and it was so much fun.
That was the best.
But no, I didn't get to meet Steve Martin.
That was great. It's little things like that I... and it's the stuff I like to do at Sesame Street too. I love that thing of can you just do my hand for this thing? There's something really rewarding about that, and
it kind of speaks to we are like a family. We're a team. Yeah, and we're there to help anybody. I'll help you at any time.
Totally.
Any favorite celebrities that you've worked with that you've just been like, oh man, that was so much fun. I really felt great.
It's a really hard question.
If you can't think of one, why don't you just tell us the Adele story?
Oh my God. Yeah, okay, that's the answer.
That just popped into my head right now.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a pretty good one.
I'll make it an abridged version because it's a long story. But we were in Australia doing a press tour, and I was with Alicia Durand, and she was. We were doing, like we haven't done them in a little while, but we would usually take about 2 or 3 weeks every other year and do an Australia trip because we have a huge audience in Australia. And so that meant anything from like doing like Rove, we would do his show, or we would do all these other Australian chat shows. And I don't remember how it came about. I found out from somebody that Adele was touring in Australia at the time I was there. And I mentioned it to Alicia, and she goes, yeah, I knew she was here, but I wasn't going to say anything to you because I knew it would be a whole thing. And I was like, we're going to meet her. I am going to make this happen. I'm going to will it into the universe. And so on every single chat show I was on, I would just have Elmo talk about how much he wants to work with Adele. And we did like hashtag Adelmo, and it became this thing. And so I was singing on one of the late night shows. I just had Elmo start to sing Rollin' in the Deep, and her people saw it. And so we went and hung out with Adele and her kid for like, a couple hours. But getting there was terrible because they were like, you have to get here. I mean, it's Adele. Like, this is like no joke. Like, you show up when Adele wants you to show up, and it's going to be, right. But we were in, I don't remember if we were in Sydney or Melbourne, but we were at least like an hour and a half away from the venue. And we'd only gotten notice of it, 45 minutes prior. They said, okay, you can come, but you have to come at 5 o'clock. And it was like 4:30, and it's rush hour traffic. So our driver is booking it through Sydney or Melbourne, whichever one it was.
Yeah, wherever you were.
And wherever I was, didn't matter. I was going to be Adele. I was going to meet Adele. And we almost didn't make it. And finally we did. And I was a nervous wreck for some reason, which is so stupid. But she was lovely, and I hung out with her kid, and her kid was obsessed with Elmo at the time, and he took Elmo and me all around the arena, the concert arena, and he showed me the band, the dressing room where the band is, and it was like it was really sweet because it was like his family. And we spent some time with her, and we went to the show the next night, and it was just an amazing experience.
Wow.
When we went to the White House, that was always a special experience. Worked with Michelle Obama a lot, and what was great recently was the Kennedy Center. That was an incredible time.
It really was.
There's just moments like that are pinch me moments, and you kind of just don't. It doesn't even feel like you're really there until you've left. There's it was. It's hard to pick one. Well, who's your favorite person that you've met?
I can't.
See what I mean? It's hard, right? Like, it's hard to pick one.
It really is.
Like, what would
we're so fortunate, and I'm so grateful to be able to say that I've, met REM.
Yeah.
And
did you do the Shiny Happy People? The Sesame?
I was,
you did?
I was the hands of the Kate Pearson monster that Stephanie did the voice for that Kevin
did. I love that bit. That's a great bit.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're doing that. Oh, yeah, because she's doing all this really fun hand stuff. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'm doing that. But we're so lucky to get to do this job.
And when we would do those, like, those word of the day bits, people would come in and out, like Bill Hader, and people who just, you're like, people that
Steve Carell.
So
many people.
Bobby Moynihan, we always have fun. I love Bobby Moynihan. We did this thing that I wish people could see because it was so much fun. We did this thing at Comic-Con, I guess 2 years ago or a year ago now.
Yeah.
It was just me, and Eric, and Bobby Moynihan, and like 50 puppets. And it was...
Again, Don Music was there.
And Don Music was there. Don Music and Lefty and a bunch of other people.
Yeah,
and Forgetful Jones was there. And it was the most fun. Again, it was like, let's just put on a show. We wrote it.
Andrew Moriarty had written this script.
Yeah.
And it was just full of just kind of retro fun and also very now stuff. It was it was great. It was so much fun to do.
I wish people could see it because it was so... hopefully it'll get out there at some point. And Bobby was the host of it, and he was just great. I love working with him.
He was great.
It's fun working with people who also have the reverence for it that we have. That adds another element. That's another spice that you can, when they take it seriously,
really
it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. All right, Ryan. So now I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So just whatever you say off the top of your head, that's your answer, and you're going to stick with it. Or you can always change it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready?
I guess so.
Why not? All right, what's the hardest part about being a puppeteer?
Explaining it to people.
What's the easiest part?
The easiest part, wow, none of it is easy. The easiest part is, it's the easiest job for me to do. I'll tell you that. It's the thing that I have to think the least about.
What's your biggest strength as a puppeteer?
I can hold my arm up for a long time.
That'll do. That's good. What's your biggest weakness?
I can't really hold my arm up for a very long time. No, my biggest weakness as a puppeteer, I've recently found myself getting a little lazy with my technique, and it's funny. The other day I was shooting something here, and there's different challenges of shooting at home, and I was kind of like, it's acceptable, but it's not. You know, have you ever done that where you watch
exactly
a playback and you're like, oh, it's doing the thing it's supposed to do, but it's callous.
But I could have done better.
I could have done better. So that
Yeah.
right now, that's my weakness is just, pushing a little bit harder.
What's one of your favorite things about being a Muppet performer?
The people and the group, this group of people, and and the fact that I think about that all the time. That like how many people have a job where the people at their job are like their family members in every sense of the word. It's just not common. I think that and just the fact that it's the only thing I've ever really, really wanted, and the fact that I get to do it I don't take that for granted.
There are probably people listening who want to hear you tell them what they have to do to become a Sesame Street Muppet performer. So what would it be?
Don't only set your sights on Sesame Street or the Muppets. You have to do your own thing. And you have to figure out, if you're going to do Muppet style, you have to figure out a way that it is uniquely your version of it. That from it depends on if they want to be a builder or a performer. If you want to be a performer, do not rely on your technique. You have to have the main Muppet, the gods, the people that we looked at when we were learning, Jim and Jerry and Fran and Richard and Frank were all actors.
Right.
And they happen to be good puppeteers. So I think that's the thing that I'm always striving to be better. I'm always trying to be a better actor. And if you've got the technique, great. But that would be the thing.
I think I may know what your answer is here, but Jerry Nelson once said to me, Sesame Street's great, but you always need to have something that is your own, that you create. So, Ryan, what is that for you?
For me, it's my characters. It's I would be doing them regardless if I was working in a bookstore or if I was doing Sesame Street. I would still be doing them because it's just in me to do it. I can't really help it, I've learned. So
it's who you are.
It's just who I am. It's just part of,
Yeah. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks for
This has been
having me,
awesome.
Maddie. This was fun.
I hope you had a good time.
I had a great time.
That was Emmy Award winner Ryan Dillon, and this has been Below the Frame. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Let us know what you think of the podcast. Our show today was produced by me. The theme song was written by Stephanie DeBruzzo and performed by the Mighty Weaklings. Our podcast artwork was created by Dave Holteen at daveholteendesign.com. Special thanks goes out, as always, to Jan Nelson for giving me Jerry's stories, and to John Kennedy for sharing his memory and reading a story by Jerry Nelson. Thanks to Emmy Award winner Ryan Dillon, he's going to kill me for continuing to say that, for being a part of this episode. And thanks to you, the fans, for listening. I'm Matt Vogel, and we'll see you next time when we go Below the Frame. Bye-bye.